There's nothing more important than fixing our broken monetary system. Everything else is secondary. If you want to look at all the injustice in the world, our broken money system is the greatest cause of this centralization. Think about the Lord of the Rings. What were they really fighting about? They were fighting for the Shire, just their community. What's more important than that? What's a smaller minority than individual sovereignty? And yet that is being stripped away with fake money. The fact that you can print money and people and others can't, that centralizes everything. And that is the biggest threat to the Shire. Money is such a universal issue. All these other things become unimportant once you understand this universal need to have an honest ledger. The rabbit hole of what is Bitcoin, what is money, is very deep. And just understanding how it's emergent and how it needs to be decentralized for it to be an honest ledger. So it is not manipulated by these central banks. When you take those signals away, then civilization falls. Look at what happened to the Soviet Union. We are in that same situation. It's because the central banks have ruined free market capitalism. Bitcoin is not a revolution, it's evolutionary. And again, this is something that ties back to John Nash and his asymptotic approach to this. Game theoretically, Bitcoin is going to win. Ideal money is going to win. And if we fork Bitcoin into ordinals or a censorship-resistant blockchain bulletin board, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the split. They may win in the short run, but in the long run, ideal money will win.
Bryan, you reached out to me on X because you wanted to talk about something specific. Can you tell me what that was?
Yeah, I think we're at let's say an inflection point or a critical point within the Bitcoin community. It's pretty clear there's a strong division within the Bitcoin community. You know, one group strongly believes in a censorship-resistant blockchain, bulletin board, more or less, and the other part of the OGs, Bitcoiners, maximalists, believe in ideal money. Bitcoin is ideal money, and so that division is becoming very clear. It's interesting. Why is that division occurred? And I think it goes back, centuries, even back to early 1700 when central banking started in France. And that is, there are people who want to manipulate the narrative and what is money for obvious reasons. They want a loosey-goosey ledger and others don't. Others want an ideal ledger, others don't. And so, if you want to prioritize censorship-free blockchain, clearly that is not having an honest ledger or an ideal money as being the priority.
Yeah, it makes sense to me as well that I thought about this a lot, actually, that Bitcoin is a threat to the system as the system that we have gotten used to. It makes sense that those who feel threatened would find avenues to attack Bitcoin. And it also makes sense to me that that's like a slow drip attack. I feel like the exploitation of that bug that was introduced together with Taproot in 2021, the inscriptions, the change of documents, or the changing of documentation to cater to that bug or to not have to deal with it or patch it is an attack. But I guess that goes back into like more of a detail. Do you think there's some sort of compromise here? Like the devs are being compromised? Like what's your take on all this?
Bitcoin Core is compromised. I believe in the thesis that Bitcoin is ideal money.
Yeah.
And everything else is spam. And so when people think that they need to have privilege with their hooks into the first layer, and that can be a threat to their narrative, what their second layer is, that their second layer has privilege by having their hooks into the first layer.
What do you mean by hooks?
And,
can you explain that?
Well, I mean, you take a look at Lightning Network. Are those proprietary hooks or not? If you can inscript JPEGs into Bitcoin, I would say clearly that's outside of ideal money. Okay,
Yeah.
clearly that, and we can filter that. And people who say we cannot filter JPEGs, that compromises their credibility. Of course, we can filter Knox. Knots are already doing that. I
Yeah.
run a Knots node. We can filter JPEGs. That's no
Yeah.
big deal. Oh, well, then they come up. Well, then you can feed that JPEG into a transaction number. Oh yeah, how many transaction numbers do you have to do before you get a full JPEG? One that's 3 megabytes. Come on, that's going to
Yeah.
be very expensive. And so this idea of having this, removing the limits on the op return, where you can put a 3 megabyte JPEG on there, but clearly we can filter that. And people say, oh, you can't filter spam. They're lying, and their
Yeah.
credibility is gone. And these are the people that have the narrative, and they have financial interests with their businesses that represent those hooks, those proprietary hooks, and they want to protect that. And that more or less is their censorship-resistant blockchain bulletin board is going to be a split between Bitcoin as ideal money. And keep in mind, President Xi is the guy who is touting, and central banks touting, blockchain, not Bitcoin. Well, blockchain wasn't the innovation in the 2008 white paper or the 2009 January 3rd release of the network. The innovation was, this is no double spend, ideal money. And then secondly, it was decentralized governance. You have to have both of those to
Yeah.
really understand the innovation that happened in 2008 and 2009.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Bitcoin, the architecture of Bitcoin and how they put it together is just elegant and beautiful. One of the things that is interesting to me is that before Core V30, filters were normal on the Bitcoin network, weren't they?
Their filters were normal on the network.
I mean, there have been filters applied to these JPEGs and inscriptions and ordinals forever.
Yeah. Consensus rules are filters,
Yeah.
That's
But their
life.
argument right now is that ordinals are still within the consensus rules, as long as they pay the
No.
fees. And you say no, is it that because they are bypassing the op return limit, or why do you say that it's not a consensus?
I think the Bitcoin's original intent has been muddled, and this is where even with OGs that you can see a split amongst the two, and I think one of the reasons why it's being obfuscated is because we've come up with this ethos of we are all Satoshi, and I'm not Satoshi, okay, and more or less we aren't supposed to understand who really created Bitcoin.
I agree.
And because we're going to dox them,
Yeah.
The truth is,
It doesn't
Satoshi's
matter.
been dead for a long time.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter
It matters
who
to
he
me
is.
because
Okay.
it matters to me because I've been going after this topic, and people say, "Oh, you can't do that." Yes, I can. Okay, I can pursue knowledge, and if you want to glorify ignorance, that's your issue. Okay, but understanding Bitcoin's intent, I think, is very important for understanding. It unlocks a new skill in understanding what Bitcoin is, and when you understand, first of all, John Nash died in 2015. Satoshi Nakamoto's last communication was, "I am not." Oh, who was it that people thought he was Satoshi in 2014? In 2014, he didn't, that was his last communication. And then John Nash died in 2014. So how do you dox a dead person? That's not.
That's assuming he's dead.
Otherwise, we can't study any history because we're going to
Yeah.
dox people.
Yeah, I understand. If he's dead, assuming he's dead, I mean, the damage of doxing somebody is not going to be as severe.
No,
But-
and secondly, people say, "Oh, it was so selfless of him, and he gave this gift." And how do people know that this was a gift that he wasn't going to come out later when it was safe? Okay, so the fact that he died was not a good thing. It was a tragedy. And because it has obfuscated the original intent of Bitcoin. I mean, look at the profile of who Satoshi was. This person was a master of value, Austrian economics. He was a master in cryptography. He was mathematics, and also this person was paranoid, right? He wasn't a young kid in a hoodie, right? This was a person who was skilled, a master in game theory. How many people meet that profile? You just take those 5 points, and John Nash matches that. And what's interesting about this, I wrote the book on this topic, and I wrote just about 18 Nash-Nakamoto connections. And since then, John over at the Nash Institute, he keeps on finding more of them, and there are really strong Nash-Nakamoto connections. And when you take those as a whole, you can say, oh, there is no smoking gun. But when you take it as a whole, clearly Nash-Nakamoto are the same people, and that unlocks the next skill of really going deeper on Bitcoin, and you can blow the OGs away on really understanding what Bitcoin is. It's simple. It's ideal money. It's really about the attack on inflation. Yeah. And inflation is an attack more on the poor and the middle class than anything else. Money is such a universal issue. Yeah. That all these other things become unimportant once you understand this universal need to have an honest ledger.
What do you think is something that people can learn from knowing that John might be Nakamoto? Is it something that we're missing, or
the main
something
thing
important?
I think the rabbit hole of what is Bitcoin, what is money, is very deep, and just understanding how it's emergent and how it needs to be decentralized for it to be an honest ledger. So it is not manipulated by these central banks, or the definition is redefined, and how it is it's an emergent attribute that enables, socialism is basically doesn't want corporations to be taking a profit. Okay, I mean, Hayek talked about this, and those are signals to show us where we actually need to help people when those profits get large, right? Those are signals, and when you take those signals away, then civilization falls. Look at what happened to the Soviet Union. Yeah. And now we are in that same situation because the fiat, the central banks have ruined free market capitalism.
Do you really think
capital is?
Go ahead. Sorry.
I believe this fake money, the fact that they have to continue to expanding the monetary system since 1971, that has basically centralized the U.S. economy. The jobs are government jobs now, more than 50%. Yeah, and that's crazy. So how is that any different from the Soviet Union, really?
I don't know much about it, but I know that central planning has ended in disaster every time. So I don't know why they keep attempting it. I don't know if it's a motivation for more power or control, or if it's just pure greed. I don't know where it comes from, but it doesn't work. History has shown us that.
Doesn't work, and people. Let me bring up another topic. This is just an issue that I keep on bringing up. These Bitcoiners keep on talking. They keep on doing this gold bug narrative, and meaning that, hey, in 3 months the sky is going to fall. We're going to, everything's going to crash. I've been hearing this since 1971. I don't buy into it.
You don't buy into that there's going to be a market crash, a large, everything bubble crash?
No, I don't. I'm really not into hyperbitcoinization. Okay. I believe in Bitcoinization, but I don't believe in the hyper. Okay. Hyperbole isn't really. I don't think it's accurate because 2 reasons. Look at Venezuela. Yeah. Did they crash? No, they just kept kicking the can down the road. That debt can.
Yeah, because
And the
even when it
reason why is because when you can
hyperinflated, they
print
were able
money,
to do that.
yeah, they can just keep on printing money. It's so powerful. When you can print money, that puts you in a very, very powerful position. So to
Hmm.
think that this fiat's just going to disappear in 3 months, as I've heard some of our influencers say, I disagree with that. I think that central banking is very powerful, and I think it's better to look at it not as Bitcoin is not a revolution; it's evolutionary. And again, this is something that ties back to John Nash and his asymptotic approach to this. In game theoretically, Bitcoin is going to win. Ideal money is going to win. And
Yeah.
if we fork Bitcoin into ordinals or a censorship-resistant blockchain bulletin board, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the split. They may win in the short run, but in the long run, ideal money will win. So yeah, I'm not into this hyperbole Bitcoinization.
Yeah, no,
I don't
I
agree
agree
with
with that.
that.
I, don't I think most people would agree with that, that 3 months, like that is unrealistic. But what about 2 decades, 3 decades, 5 decades?
Yeah, I could see it happening in 10 years. You look at what's happening to the EU.
Yeah.
It's starting to break up. Italy and other nations are waking up that
Yeah.
this ECB is a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
It's metastasized, and especially with them trying to bring in the CDBC,
Oh, yeah, it's
central
coming.
bank. What is it? What is CBDC's
Yeah.
central bank digital coin? Yeah.
Let's talk about the hard fork that you're talking about. There's so many people saying that they would, give me a second. There we go. There's so many people that say that somebody has to or will eventually fork off. Do you think that would be the ordinal side? Like, how would that even happen?
I don't know who's going to be first. I I think what is it 110 44 BIP 110 BIP
I
444 I
think that's the
believe
same one. Yeah.
BIP the cat where it's just going to burn the spam. In other words,
Yeah.
start filtering JPEGs.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to get behind that. I think the
Yeah.
cat is very new. There's a lot of work to be done on it. It needs to be polished, but we're going to get there. And the cat, the BIP, will eventually, maybe not in 2 months, but within a year, roughly. I think the cat is going to happen as a Bitcoin improvement. What is
Proposal.
it? Proposal.
Do you think that will lead to the ordinals cohort hard fork?
I don't know the mechanics of how it's going to happen in the future, but I think that the ordinals, the JPEGs will get burned. We're going to rug them,
Yeah,
and
I
how
really
how
hope
is that
that'll
going to
happen.
happen?
I really hope that'll happen.
I think it will,
Do you think it's a
because like I
certainty?
said, there's a strong division between is Bitcoin a censorship-resistant blockchain or is it ideal money? And again, some people we are all Satoshi, and they want to ignore John Nash's influence on Bitcoin. If they understood that, they would know that Bitcoin is ideal money. It's blockchain existed before Bitcoin was around. That wasn't the novel idea. That wasn't
Yeah.
the innovation in 2008, 2009.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, there's others that are attributed with the innovation. I forget their names, but I have it out on. I have the reference on Solstin.com, John Nash, and I have about 70 digital references to the John Nash book, and that's where I have one of the references. I could look it up for you on who is attributed the blockchain innovation. There's two
Do you
guys
mean
that
it's
innovated blockchain.
do you mean Nick Szabo and Adam Back?
No, no, no,
Okay.
no, not
It's two
Adam
different
Back. No,
guys.
no, no.
Okay, yeah, no. Adam Back is off the deep end, it seems like.
Yeah, he's censorship resistant blockchain bulletin board dude, and
Yeah, I don't know what
it's
happened. Like
Bitcoin's ideal money.
that doesn't seem
He says that we can't filter Or we,
Yeah, I mean,
you can filter JPEGs. Come on.
of course,
That's
of
just
course.
a bald-faced lie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that to me is sort of what tips off that they are have other interests. There's some others external source that
Absolutely.
is motivating them to act in the way that they're doing. You said something interesting earlier. While you look that up, we can get back to it eventually. That Bitcoin is an evolution and not a revolution. I would love for you to talk more about that because I always thought that it was a revolution because a revolution would mean to me that the people choose a new path, a
Yeah,
new way.
let me explain that. And I'll do some queries on that and get that those two guys, their names of who created blockchain. Basically, it was John Nash went through this evolution himself. Keep in mind that the guy was a genius when he was 19 years old. He wrote non-cooperative games, doing his PhD when he was 20 or 21. He graduated in 22 when he was getting his PhD, and that's where he just assumed ideal money, and he really received that training from doing his masterworks over at Carnegie. Bert Hoslitz was an Austrian economist. He only took one economics class during his master's, and he won a Nobel Prize in economics. Now, if you trace Bert Hoslitz, he goes back to the Chicago University economics, and he actually, when he was in Austria, he actually went to seminars, Mises seminars. So there's your pedigree on the Austrian economics, going to John Nash, and of course he obsessed with economics, and ever since he took that course, and you look at the coursework that was given by Bert Hoslitz to John Nash. I was able to piece that together by going back to the University of Chicago and looking at the archives and getting his tests before and after. And it totally ties into John Nash's 1950 dissertation on non-cooperative games and the Nash Equilibrium, which was just a finite game. And of course, Bitcoin is an infinite game, but it's also really about that Bitcoin equilibrium, emerging Bitcoin equilibrium. It has elements of the non-cooperative games. But so John Nash was obsessed with money, and in fact, his son complained about him because when your father is mentally ill and he's always talking about Richard Nixon, and this was a man, even during his 25 years of mental illness, was obsessing over economics and sound money and ideal money. And by the way, ideal money is more powerful than sound money, and Bitcoin is ideal money. And so in 1983, after 25 years of illness, he started to come out of it and out of his paranoid schizophrenia. And one way for his therapy was he was going to the computer lab every day at Princeton, and he attributes that as being his therapy, his occupational therapy. And so in 1983, he started programming. And he was programming before that. Keep in mind that, back in 1955, working for Rand, he was proposing, encryption, decryption machines and decentralized architecture with his parallel paper. So this is something he was doing all of his life consistently. And even during his 25 years of mental illness, he was also very focused on that topic. Now, during his programming years, he came along and he told his dear friend that he was working on the Big Bang, okay, in his software. And of course, he went dark after that. But he published in 2002 Ideal Money, okay? And that was really, let's say, very much revolutionary, but it had the contingency that governments around the world would work to find, how to keep that inflation stable by using commodities. And he knew before 2002 that the governments would never be cooperative on this. He knew it because he immediately started talking about asymptotic ideal money. That's evolutionary. That's slow, emergent. The natural way money becomes money, that emergent behavior. So here he talked about asymptotic ideal money, the evolutionary approach, the natural way of doing things, as opposed to ideal money, which is very much a revolutionary way of getting to an honest ledger. So for 2002 to 2015, he spoke about the evolutionary approach, asymptotic ideal money, AIM.
To 2015?
Yeah, he died in 2015.
Okay.
In a taxi accident with his wife coming home from. He won another award in mathematics, and he was coming home from the airport and coming back to New Jersey and coming down the pike, and he and his wife were ejected from the taxi, and it was a horrible death, and it was a tragedy for Bitcoin too, losing him. It was not a good thing that he disappeared.
I never heard of that. What did you mean about the 2000? Why is 2002 such a pivotal year? What was
that? Was the
release?
year that he published. That was the year he published Ideal Money.
Is that possible to look up? Is it a paper?
Yeah, it's a paper. Yeah, you can go find it.
John Nash. I'm just gonna Google it. Just as lecture by John F. Nash Jr. Ideal Money.
Yes.
Princeton University. I want to read that. Cool. That's interesting. So, why are you so passionate about this, Bryan? What led you to Bitcoin and? Yeah.
There's nothing more important than fixing our broken monetary system. Everything else is secondary. All the if you want to look at all the injustice in the world, our broken money system is the greatest cause of this centralization. Think about the Lord of the Rings. What were they really fighting about? They were fighting for the Shire, right? Just their community. What's more important than that? What's a smaller minority than individual sovereignty? And yet that is being stripped away with fake money. The fact that you can print money and people and others can't, that centralizes everything. And that is the biggest threat to the Shire. So why are we passionate about this? Tell me what else I should be thinking about that's more important.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you think that the ability to create money shouldn't be in the hands of humans?
Well, now that can be kind of a loaded question because there are derivatives. When you create a loan, that's creating money. That's secondary, tertiary. But
where do you draw a line?
No, they should not.
Where do you draw the line?
I'm talking about first layer. You should. That's why gold was so close to the truth. It wasn't quite there yet because that too can be mined and debased, roughly 2% a year. But ideal money, you can't. Eventually, 140 years from now, you cannot debase it at all, and so that's even better. So that's truly an honest ledger where market signals will be pure.
How do you explain Bitcoin to someone who has never heard of it before?
I've always struggled with that. And historically, I'm not a good orange piller. I've orange pilled a lot of people, and like it was easy to do in El Salvador. But when you're involved with people like financial advisors that are, dependent on the money printing system for the success of their business, I've had 5-year conversations of, their eyes glaze over still, and it's like, oh, blockchain or Bitcoin. So I've learned the hard way that it's really not good to talk about Bitcoin directly. It's better to talk about the problem that fiat creates, and then you can get connections, and it's pretty straightforward at that point. But like Jeff Booth did in that great book, The Price of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I read it.
He really talks about Bitcoin at the end. And I
Yeah,
think that's how you make connections and stop talking about Bitcoin and talk about the fiat problems first, and then you won't come across. Okay, I'm a maxi, right? But that doesn't mean I want to hang out with other maxis that are talking about Bitcoin all the time, right?
I agree.
Especially with some of their antics,
Yeah.
that can be tiresome. So, and it really is, I believe, damaging to the narrative. So I think if you focus more on the problems, the way Jeff Booth does, he's a total gentleman,
Yeah.
very knowledgeable. I love that guy.
Yeah, me too.
If you do that first, then you're not going to alienate people. You're not going to
Yeah.
be offensive. You're not going to be toxic. You can have polite dinner conversation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. To just recognize the issues that we face. Sometimes, I mean, people are trigger happy on explaining or talking and storytelling about the things that are hard to them. Most of the time, and many times, that can tie back to money and their job and the things that they have to do to be able to survive. And to be able to, tie back into Bitcoin in that way seems like a reasonable way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you an example. Somebody, I just said the word Bitcoin, and this lady immediately says, "Well, that's a divisive topic." And I just asked a rhetorical question. I said, "Well, how is it divisive?"
Yeah.
That's a good question to ask. Even that question seemed to trigger her even to a higher level emotional state.
Yeah.
And I thought, Bitcoin, sometimes you just can't address it directly. Again, it's best to go back to what are the problems? Inflation is the problem. That's what's debasing wages. That's what is debasing your savings. It's the reason why conservation in this fiat world is futile. Savings
Yeah.
is being stolen by the middle class or from the middle
From the
class and
middle
from the
class, yeah.
poor. So inflation is the key problem. And so
Yeah.
really just understanding what is inflation, what causes it, is the path to understanding what is Bitcoin's original intent.
So you come across somebody that is happy to share their difficulties, their hardships in life, their adversity, whatever, and you make an attempt at explaining to them that, well, it might tie back to inflation. How do you go about explaining that to them? How do you put
I like
words?
to, I'd like to talk about the theft of inflation and how the expanding monetary system does that. And it's not just inflation, that's just the tip of the iceberg. What's below the water is they're ripping off all of the productivity that's being gained by technology. Technology is
Yeah,
highly deflationary. We like
yeah,
that. But if you talk to financial advisors, they like prices go up. They
yeah.
don't like deflation. And so you have all these people that have been indoctrinated since 1971, and truthfully, they're a bunch of socialists now. And not only that, our education system here in the United States is backing that up with all this Keynesian ideology or indoctrination, excuse me.
Do you think that's the
Um,
main avenue for indoctrination? Universities?
I would say our higher education has been hijacked, by central banking. Yeah.
That's rough. That's a heavy topic. And it's because it's hard to be the person that starts, you know, saying that, hey, there's this big powerful big brother over there that is destroying our wealth and destroying our ability to preserve our wealth, to save our time and the money that we work so hard for, to be able to plan for
Yeah,
the
and, and,
future.
and And let's break that down into a two-step process. Really, first of all, they are centralizing capital. They are centralizing generational wealth, and then it gets evaporated. And so really it's a two-step process.
So what do you mean by
The
centralizing? So first you mean there's a wealth transfer.
Yeah, when you can print money, you're gonna print money and buy assets, and that's the centralizing function. And then
Hmm.
after that, you look at rental properties compared to home ownership. Who's the one who's investing in that home, putting their time into improving that home, and other people who are not going to do that. So when you live in a centralized governance, the vast majority of people are not going to be building generational wealth at that point because they're just not incented to do so.
Yeah.
So yeah, the generational wealth starts to evaporate at that point. Is it destroyed initially? No, it's just transferred, but then it begins to, the motivation for conservation and savings disappears.
So they produce money out of thin air, and then they go out buy stocks. So they own the companies. They buy all the real estate. What else?
I think the big one out there right now is the arbitrage between the yen and the U.S. Treasuries,
But that's
or the
going away, right?
JGB. Well, it's got like a 2 point spread right now between a 10-year Japanese government bond and a 10-year, U.S. Treasury or bond. So it's a two. It's yeah. It's shrinking, but it's still there. And do I think it's going to go in the near term? I don't know, but I don't know. When you look at Japan, I think it's one of those situations where nothing's going to stop this train, and you can see the interest rates go up on the bonds, Japanese bonds. So yeah, I think they're in trouble. I think Japan's in trouble. They are the canary in the coal mine. They're, the biggest debt to GDP ratio of any state nation in the world right now. So yeah, it's going to go away probably. That arbitrage,
Yeah, I've been
and that's
reading it a
gonna
little bit.
that's gonna destroy a lot of global liquidity, a lot, possibly in the trillions, and of course that's gonna create a recession, global recession.
So you think that will be the last trigger that
I'll
starts?
just it will just force the U.S. to start printing, do QE in a big way, So they'll just kick the can down the road. Is the sky going to fall? No, I don't think so. They'll just print a lot of money and increase the
Centralization.
centralization of our economy. Which in the short term, no big deal, but in the long term, yeah, it just keeps getting worse.
Yeah.
Wages keep getting debased, savings keeps getting debased, generational wealth keeps getting debased. It's not good. It's we're all Venezuela now with all these central banks and in these westernized countries. We're all Venezuela. It was Jeff Fleet that said that, and I really agree with that.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's a doomer take, and it's in a way a very it's like a dire warning to everybody. I'm just thinking about all the people that one don't know about Bitcoin. That's fair enough. Like I understand that, but also the people that don't know why they are unable to continue searching, why they are unable to see improvement in their financial situation, and still not gather the focus, the attention, the wherewithal to be able to take matter into their own hands and start asking the right questions. That's what worries me the most. That there's so many people that just don't know. And when the shit hits the fan, how many people are going to be left, you know, needing things that they require to survive? And I don't know. It's a scary picture to paint, and I think it's scary to even just think about it. Saying those words is even worse. But I don't know how it's gonna play out. I really just hope we have more time than we think. Some people say I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, 3, 4, 5 years, 20, 30. I don't know. I just hope we have more time to reach out to people and to educate and to make people understand that the solution to their issues or their problems or to their hardships and the financial situation of their lives is Bitcoin. But again, as we talked about earlier, you got to be somewhat of a good communicator to be able to get through to people to achieve that.
Okay, I couldn't find it in my work. I was doing, too many hits. But I just went to ChatGPT and I asked the question, who's attributed for the blockchain innovation, right? And it was Stuart Haber and Scott Stornetta, and that was back in 1991. Now,
Oh,
the
yeah.
white paper was written in 2008. So 1991, blockchain was around. In other words, you do a hash, you stick it inside of a block, then you do another hash, and that creates the chain.
Yeah.
So really, 1991, there it is. So blockchain really wasn't the innovation. Bitcoin's innovation was two things: decentralized, digital transaction. Second thing, decentralized governance. It's both.
Yeah.
And it seems we're losing decentralized governance with Bitcoin Core V30.
Yeah.
That consensus seems to be disappearing. So we're V30 is a big problem.
And the reason for that
I think
is
it will be
because-
resolved. I think more people will be running knots. Knots, I think,
Yeah.
is one way to rebuild that consensus and get back to ideal money.
I think you're right about that. And I just want to clarify, I don't know, because whoever knows or doesn't know, for the reason that Core V30 is such an issue. It's that nodes store the entire blockchain, the entire history of the blockchain, which means every transaction that has ever been executed on the network is stored in different nodes, and probably tens of thousands of nodes around the world. When inscriptions and ordinals are put into these transactions, they create larger transactions, which every node has to store on their hard drive. There's an argument that I'm hearing lately that I have not seen a good response to yet. There is 4 megabytes of space in each block. Isn't it okay to fill those 4 megabytes every 10
No,
minutes?
it's not, because when I just recently built a knots node, it took me about 2 days to synchronize my Linux laptop to download that entire node, that entire blockchain, and that's not cool. So the fact that these inscriptions and now the op return is filling up all those blocks with spam, non-monetary. What I mean by spam is non-monetary transactions. And Gloria Zhao, she doesn't see the problem with that. Todd doesn't see a problem with that.
Jameson Lop.
Lop doesn't see a problem with that. Adam Back doesn't see a problem with that. So all these people think that you should have this censorship-resistant blockchain bulletin board, and never mind that it degrades Bitcoin as ideal money. And we really only need, if you believe Bitcoin is ideal money and everything else is spam, we don't need this additional functionality.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't need these other use cases.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, right? Meow. The cat's coming.
Yeah.
We are going to burn the spam.
I love the fact that there is a movement going now that is called Rug the Spammers.
Oh, we will rug the spammers. And when Lop says, what if we are a bad actor? What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, that clip is
the
just
BIP,
so
the cat is going to happen.
revealing, for sure.
That dude is a bad actor. Todd is a bad actor.
Yeah,
Adam Back is a bad actor. These
Yeah, I
guys
think
are
so
putting
too.
their personal interests, their personal businesses interests ahead of Bitcoin as ideal money.
Yeah, I think so too, for sure. And it's I mean, I I'm not as technical as I would like to be. I'm studying a little bit. I did a post today about the history of SegWit and what led us to the fact that we need BIP and the cat, and it goes back to, you know, Schnur, I don't know how to pronounce that, signatures and the exploit and all of
Schnorr.
that. Yeah. But I saw some videos.
By the way,
and
that was another Nash-Nakamoto connection. As Nash was writing about that in the 50s about, the guy was a cryptography expert, right? He where he got this all from was Princeton was a hotbed for cryptography during World War II. That's where they broke the Japanese cryptography. But he was mixed in with these guys, his colleagues, and so he was very
50s?
good at it. In the 50s, well, he graduated 1950. That's when he published. He was 21 years old. Yeah. And before that, he was doing his master's or his PhD at Princeton. So yeah, he's mixing it up with the top cryptographers in the world. So he was talking about being able to, he was really into these prime numbers, and that's used for cryptography. And he was putting these inside of messages that go to the elliptical curve. And he considered his ciphering and deciphering machine unbreakable. I mean, he wrote that in a letter to the U.S. Military in 1955 when he was working for Rand. So, that's the way Bitcoin's architected. I mean, this guy figured it out back in 1955, and so he was already a master in cryptography back then. So that's another Nash-Nakamoto connection. And like I said, I wrote in that book, John Nash and the Bitcoin Equilibrium. I don't know what I titled it. I wrote that a couple years ago. But that's where I cover 18 connections. And there's other very strong connections. Like I discovered that the first version of Bitcoin had code relating to poker. And John Nash in 1950 in his dissertation, in non-cooperative games, because that was one of his game theoretic papers, he talks about poker as illustrating non-cooperative games. And let me just add one more thing. I know we're running short on time now, but why is non-cooperative games, why was that such a seminal paper? Why was that so highly referenced, even though John Nash was mentally ill for 25 years and people heavily referenced? It was a generalization of Adam Smith's The Invisible Hand that mathematically defined that relationship, that equilibrium, that fixed point theorem along with other axioms that really show that these non-cooperative behaviors lead to cooperative behaviors. Like the butcher doesn't cut meat because he's trying to take care of your family. He does it because there's profit and there's utility to be shared by people specializing. And clearly John Nash defined that invisible hand mathematically. And so later on, after his illness, after he won the Nobel Prize, it's like, what are you going to do next? And he talked about the infinite Nash equilibrium, which includes, that fixed point theorem. Fixed point theorem, Brown's fixed point theorem, and there's others out there. Think of it as kind of like a coffee spinning, and all these transactions are kind of spinning around, but how value is defined are those relationships between those
is that
the equilibrium is those relationships between what's being exchanged. And so
is that the elliptic curve that is used for the wallet addresses?
That's cryptography. That's something else. This is the non-cooperative games was wholly about economics, and I'm going to say Austrian economics. It's really, John Nash was a master in value, and Austrian economics is about looking at value. The individual is individual sovereignty. They're going to choose what's most valuable for them, and from them, these other, let's say, governments are really second, third derivatives of that. They're not, centralized government is not, the first layer. It's a derivative of individual sovereignty. And that's very much the way Austrian economics sees things. Now, of course, I'm improvising a little bit,
Yeah,
but
because
that's how I see things.
that's where the argument that Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value falls flat, right?
Well, that's funny. Does any money have intrinsic value? Does a ledger have intrinsic value? We all need an honest ledger. We have this double entry system, since the Renaissance. It was invented in Italy, so that we would have an honest ledger rather than a single entry. And is a ledger, does it have intrinsic value? No, it doesn't. But it's a tool, and that tool is critically important. So, if people don't want intrinsic value, if they want to criticize Bitcoin because it doesn't have intrinsic value, it's like, cool. So you don't want an honest ledger then? Is that really what you need the monetary system to inflate, and we need to be able to print money to keep fiat functioning. And so you don't want an honest ledger. That's really what you're arguing. You're not really, this intrinsic value stuff is it's a straw man.
Yeah, and from what we have concluded so far is that there's a lot of people that benefit from the money printer or being close to the money printer, and that narrative being, spewed around to people that are just easy to convince and that are naive and that believe whatever they're told.
Most of the U.S. economy is now dependent on it now. So, most of the are related to government jobs. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about the title of this book. I titled this Bitcoin and Nash Equilibrium, and the second title was the Emerging Bitcoin Equilibrium. I don't think a lot of OGs or Bitcoin necessarily understand that concept. There's a lot of guys that are just, they're into censorship-resistant blockchain or number go up. But really, if you look at asymptotic ideal money and this equilibrium that's emerging, it's not there yet. U.S. dollar has really got the equilibrium. In other words, all our transactions as a unit of account is being figured out with U.S. dollar. And I don't necessarily think the U.S. dollar is going to go away. I think really long term, decades down the road, I think that U.S. dollar may stay around, and it will just be backed by Bitcoin. So I think that's an interesting concept. So we don't, it just becomes which is the most stable, and it's more or less which asset is larger. That's really the when do we actually hit that inflection point? Well, if you look at game theory, and Bitcoin is ideal money, and the inflation rate keeps on going down, clearly you can see what's going to happen in the long term, and Bitcoin will achieve that emerging equilibrium eventually.
Do you think
but anyways, I titled it Bitcoin and Nash Equilibrium, and I kind of wish I had titled it. I really would kind of write another book on this instead of hitting like 18, write like the 30 plus Nash-Nakamoto connections. They just keep on popping up, and I would say most of those are related to really understanding Bitcoin's original intent, and that's the unlock new skill code for really understanding Bitcoin and really becoming a Bitcoin maximalist.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm interested in reading that. I'm grappling with an idea though that I understand the fact that doxing somebody that is dead is not necessarily an issue, but that person, John Nash, might have had a family, might have had people that depended on him. Isn't doxing him also doxing them?
You could look at it perhaps that way, but I don't think so. He's a historical figure. John Nash was a historical figure before 2008. And I think the tragedy of the book A Beautiful Mind it's a great book. I've read it and I reference it pretty heavily. But it really focuses on his illness rather than his achievements. And I think it's time that we start to recognize John Nash for his greatness. This guy was a lone genius, and he would take difficult problems and go out and write programs and then bring back reams of paper to prove that, hey, these things work on thousands of iterations. And the guy was a recognized, brilliant lone wolf. And I think that kind of recognition is not only the people, does it honor and recognize John Nash, but people studying him actually build their skill sets by understanding what he achieved.
Interesting. Let's leave it on a high note. You said something about El Salvador. Are you involved in Salvador or creating something over there?
Oh, no, I just went down there just before they had their Bitcoin
Having
day
party?
where it became, yeah, I went down there for like 5 weeks before and just toured around the country and, just getting to know El Salvador. And wow, it was a great trip and got to know a lot of good people. And yeah, El Salvador, I think the president down there is just doing an amazing job. And I mean, truly, he understands Bitcoin's original intent. You listen to that man, he intuitively understands it.
Yeah.
And why it's valuable to the middle class and to the poor, why it's so critically important, so that people can start building generational wealth with savings and thrift without that being debased by central banks.
So I take it you're hopeful
And
for the future.
I am, and keep in mind, one of the things that I mean, everyone's read Genesis Block, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the strongest Nash-Nakamoto connections out there, because Nash was very critical of the partners, right? And here in the Genesis Block, they're talking about another bailout, and so that's those two obsessions. How many people are really obsessed with bailouts, with debts being pardoned? Not too many people. It's kind of let's
I don't
say
really
a
know.
minority obsession. But yeah, again, here's a guy who was obsessed over ideal money. And what was his motivation for ideal money? Because he wrote his paper in 1950, his dissertation, assuming ideal money, and he sees ideal money being thrown into the trash can with the money printer. So yeah, his non-cooperative games and other papers kind of lose meaning, just as free market capitalism lose meaning when there is no standard measurement of value, and that measurement of value keeps changing over time.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got me interested in reading a little bit about him at least, and figuring out what he's all about and his papers, and yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into it. I really appreciate your time and you reaching out to have this conversation, and I'll let you know when we're posting it. You can share with everybody what you have going on or where they can find you.
Yeah, and go to solstin.com, and you don't even have to buy the book. Just you can click on it; it'll take you to an Amazon link. But I recommend that you scroll down and you just go through the 70 roughly different footnotes that I have. That you can follow the link and go to the original content that is over at Princeton Math Department of his papers. So you can just read through it and start to get to know John Nash from his work. And there's also links to videos. Now I couldn't link into A Beautiful Mind because that's not in digital form. But I think reading A Beautiful Mind is also another way to really give you a broad understanding of John Nash. I think watching the movie A Beautiful Mind, I loved it the first time I saw it, but I watch it now. It's difficult. It's a little bit cringy now because it's such a focus on his illness rather than his accomplishments.
So where would you go to find out about his genius?
Well, I think I think I got one of the best books out there on John Nash now. Bitcoin and Nash Equilibrium, the emerging Bitcoin Equilibrium by me, Bryan Solstin, and you can find a link to Amazon at solstin.com. I think I've got one of the best books out there on Nash. Now, A Beautiful Mind, granted, that's also a great book. The book is better than the movie, but it's a different focus. One is more interested in the illness and of paranoid schizophrenia, which, by the way, Satoshi was paranoid. I mean, who else would be so obsessed over hiding their identity of doing such a great open source development? I think he would have, after Bitcoin was broadly accepted, and we're going to get there eventually, I think he would have come out. He was clearly wanting acceptance of his other mathematicians. Now, he didn't care about, let's call it retail or the general public, because they just were obsessed over his illness, and he just wanted privacy for obvious reasons. He's a recovering paranoid schizophrenic.
Wouldn't that put like the million coin wallet like in such, like, wouldn't he be hammered about that? Like, people would chase him down, like that wouldn't that be at risk?
Well, I think anybody who owns Bitcoin is at risk. So yeah, you have to
Fair.
mind your security. But I mean, is Michael Saylor at risk? Absolutely. I mean, but
Is that
I think
how you
that
view the doxing of him and his family as not an issue?
I see him as a historical figure, and it's not doxing him, no.
But their family or his
Uh,
family?
well, we can talk about his family. His wife died. He has two children that remained. Both of them have recovered from schizophrenia. Um, so would that be doxing them? You know, I, I think that they personally have had issues with their father growing up. They had their own struggles. But with this kind of knowledge, I think it would add to their understanding of their father, and they would be most grateful for understanding the Nash-Nakamoto connections, and there are many. So would they be grateful or would they be doxxed? And I think they would be grateful.
Interesting. Cool. Nash again. I mean, Nash. Brian, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'd love to do this sometime in the future again. And
Love
yeah,
to. Yeah, maybe I'll get a second book done in a couple of years and get a lot of those concisely defined Nash-Nakamoto connections and that would be. I have other things going on right now. I just don't have time. So yeah, we'll get together at a later time.
yeah, your passion about it is evident. So I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.